Space is no longer above us. It is inside your life. Every swipe on your phone, every GPS turn, every shipment of food, every military signal, all of it depends on satellites you never see. Now imagine this system breaking. That is the fear and the ambition behind Donald Trump's new space policy. Not cooperation, not balance, dominance. The message is blunt. America must lead space, control space, outrun everyone else. Moon bases by 2018, permanent lunar presence by 2030, nuclear power in orbit, missile defense above the Earth, and a commercial space boom worth tens of billions of dollars. It sounds visionary. It feels powerful. It is cinematic. But here is the uncomfortable truth. History shows us that raw power without rules creates chaos. And chaos in space does not stay in space. If you think this is just about rockets and astronauts, you're wrong. This is about global order and about whether America is building leadership or future instability. Stay with me. Because to understand what comes next, we first need to understand what is really at stake. Let's slow this down and define the problem clearly. The United States depends on space more than any other country. Navigation, intelligence, communications, timing systems that make modern economies function. Thousands of American satellites orbit the Earth right now. They guide crops, they move ships, they power financial networks, they support military operations. But America no longer operates alone. China is emerging as a near-peer competitor in space. Dozens of other countries are launching satellites at record speed. More than 90 nations now have assets in orbit. Space is becoming crowded, congested, and increasingly contested. Trump's new policy responds to this reality with one dominant idea: speed over coordination, power over rules, superiority over shared governance. The goal is clear: secure U.S. economic and security interests, return to the moon, build permanent infrastructure, unleash commercial space at scale. But the core tension remains unresolved. How do you lead a domain that belongs to everyone while refusing to help write the rules? That question takes us backward into how we got here. To understand this moment, we have to look backward. Not to rockets, but to rules. Space was never meant to be lawless. In the 1,960 seconds, world powers understood the risk early. Satellites were multiplying, military uses were expanding, mistrust was rising, so they built a framework, basic treaties, shared norms, agreements that said space was not a battlefield, but a commons. For decades, that system worked imperfectly, but effectively. Orbit stayed predictable, traffic stayed manageable, conflict stayed limited. Then everything accelerated. Technology got cheaper, launches became frequent, private companies entered the arena, states followed fast. Today, satellites crowd Earth's orbit. Debris multiplies. Military assets move closer to civilian ones. Mistakes carry global consequences. Yet the old rules never evolved. Trump's new policy emerges from this gap, a system straining under new pressures, a belief that speed can replace governance, that dominance can substitute for cooperation. But space history tells us something crucial. Power grows fastest when order exists. And that brings us to the first real stress test. The first crack appears quietly, not in orbit, but in diplomacy. Each year, technical experts meet under the United Nations. They work on something unglamorous: space traffic safety, debris management, basic conduct. No speeches, no flags, just engineers and policymakers trying to prevent collisions. This year, something unusual happened. The United States helped shape the discussions. American experts contributed ideas, practical ones, useful ones. Then came the vote, a non-binding resolution, modest, technical, harmless by design. It passed almost unanimously, 171 to 1. The lone no was Washington. The reason was not space safety. It was language, references to sustainability, mentions of climate change. This was not symbolic. It was strategic self-harm. By rejecting even voluntary norms, the United States weakened its own ability to shape behavior in space. If the leading space power refuses rules, others will write them instead. If this matters to you because disorder in orbit affects life on Earth, this is the moment to pay attention, because that small diplomatic break reveals a much deeper mechanism. And that is where we go next. What you are seeing is not confusion. It is a design choice. The new space policy is built on a single assumption. Markets move faster than governments, and speed beats structure. So power is shifted away from diplomats, away from multilateral forums, toward agencies that acquire and companies that launch. Commercial space is no longer support. It is strategy. Private firms are asked to replace the International Space Station, to accelerate launches, to handle re-entry, to draw in $50 billion in new capital by 2028. Government sets the destination. Business builds the road. At the same time, older coordination mechanisms are stripped back. Councils dissolved, processes shortened, deadlines tightened. Even security follows this logic. Nuclear power in space, missile defense above the atmosphere. Technology first, rules later. This is the hidden mechanism, not isolation, but substitution. Replace diplomacy with hardware. Replace norms with momentum. Replace consensus with capability. It looks efficient, it feels modern, but it carries a silent risk. In a shared domain, systems without shared rules eventually collide. And that collision is no longer theoretical, it is already forming. The second crisis is not diplomatic, it is physical. Space is getting crowded, dangerously crowded. Satellites fly closer together. Civilian and military assets share the same orbits. Debris multiplies with every launch and every test. One mistake is enough. A collision at orbital speed creates thousands of fragments. Those fragments create more collisions, a chain reaction. Suddenly, orbits become unusable. Navigation fails. Communications degrade. Warning systems go blind. The irony is sharp. The country that depends most on space is also the one most exposed to disorder in orbit. Trump's policy pushes speed. Launch faster. Build faster. Deploy faster. But speed without coordination compresses reaction time. In space, there are no emergency brakes, no second chances. This is the moment where dominance meets reality, where technology alone cannot prevent systemic failure. And the consequences do not stay above the atmosphere. They come down to Earth. Now bring this back to you, because when space fails, it doesn't fail on a screen in Washington. It fails in your daily life. Your phone loses precision. Maps drift. Delivery systems slow. Financial networks lose timing accuracy. Airplanes reroute. Ports clog. Supply chains stutter. You don't see satellites, but you feel them when they stop working. And here's the hard truth. You don't get a warning. There is no headline that says, space infrastructure degraded today. There is only friction, delay, confusion. The people hit first are never the ones who made the policy. They are commuters, farmers, businesses, families. If space becomes unstable, you pay the price quietly. This is why leadership matters. Not power for its own sake, but restraint, coordination, rules that prevent disasters before they happen. If this perspective resonates with you, pause for a second. Share this because the future of space is already shaping life on Earth. And what happens next goes far beyond America. What happens in orbit never stays national. Space is global by design. American GPS does not serve only Americans. Neither do China's Beidou systems, or Europe's Galileo, or Russia's GLONASS, or Japan's regional networks. These systems overlap, back each other up, and silently coordinate the modern world. That means instability spreads fast. A collision in one orbit forces adjustments in others. A military move by one state raises alert levels everywhere. A lack of rules creates mistrust across borders. Now add geopolitics. China watches US acceleration carefully. Europe worries about being sidelined. Emerging space nations fear exclusion from a domain they also depend on. When the leading power rejects shared norms, others hedge. They build redundancies. They harden systems. They prepare for confrontation. This is how competition becomes escalation. Not through intention, but through reaction. Space stops being a platform for cooperation and becomes a multiplier of global tension. And once that shift happens, reversing it becomes far harder, which brings us to the future. Now, let's imagine three futures. The first, the optimistic path. The US combines speed with structure. Commercial innovation thrives. Rules of the road are agreed internationally. Moon bases rise. Space becomes a platform for shared prosperity. Leadership is measured not just by rockets, but by trust and stability. The second, the middle ground. The US leads in technology but rejects broader cooperation. Accidents occur, satellites collide, tensions flare with other nations. Progress continues, but fragile, expensive, and contested. The cost of dominance begins to outweigh its benefits. The third, the cautionary scenario. Speed without rules breeds chaos. Space debris grows uncontrollable. Critical satellites fail. Global networks falter. The United States loses its operational edge. Leadership is replaced by survival, and the world pays the price. The choice is not abstract. It is deliberate. Every decision from budget cuts to treaty participation shapes which future arrives. Space is more than exploration. It is the architecture of global order. And the next decade will define whether America leads wisely or stumbles blindly. This is the moment to decide. The United States can dominate space, but domination alone is not leadership. Leadership requires vision, rules, cooperation. The policy on paper is bold. It promises moon bases, nuclear power, private sector surges, and rapid technological leaps. But the real question is, will it create stability or chaos? You watching this are part of the equation. The choices leaders make above Earth's atmosphere touch everything below it, your security, your economy, your daily life. If America wants true space leadership, it must pair power with responsibility, speed with structure, ambition with cooperation. And that is the insight you need to carry forward. Space is not won by rockets alone. It is won by rules, by trust, and by the wisdom to act before crisis strikes. If this perspective matters to you, share it. Discuss it, because the future of space and of the world is already being written. This is where the story continues. Stay alert, stay informed, and watch closely.